So yeah, anyway, welcome back. So this is the kind of sixth bonus week of the course, and yeah, lovely to see a few of you here. It's really good. So the idea for tonight really is to focus on on meditating. So what we'll do is we'll have two longer sessions of meditation. We'll have a period of Metta Bhavana in the second half. And the first half, I wanted to do a bit of mindfulness of breathing. So I'll say a little bit about that before we do it. And then after we do it, there'll just be an open space for questions. And then in the second half, I'll say a little bit about the Metta Bhavana, and then again at the end there'll be a space for questions. So it's quite informal. I haven't got loads I want to say. It's in a way I more just want to open up a space where we can just practice meditation together, and also have an opportunity to get into a bit of dialogue about the practice if there are things that need to be asked or talked about or discussed. So yeah, so basically that's the plan. So bit of talk, meditation, discussion, questions and answers, break, and then bit of talk, meditation, and then a bit of time for discussion, questions and answers. So that's the basic plan. Just before we start, actually, are there any questions? I'll just shut the recording off then. So yeah, so with the mindfulness of breathing, it can be quite helpful to approach the practice as if you're doing the first stage of the Metta Bhavana. So you're approaching the mindfulness of breathing as a practice of kindness for yourself, or love for yourself, or care for yourself, or metta for yourself. So I say that because sometimes we can become quite forceful or unkind when we do the mindfulness of breathing, particularly if something's happening that we're not finding pleasant. So again, like one of the things that can happen is when you meditate, things bump into your mind that are unpleasant that you have to do during the course of the day, and you don't want to be thinking about that. So you kind of force them out. You kind of push them out in a kind of forceful way. And it doesn't really help. It just means you can get a bit tense and a bit unhappy. So one really good way of like I said, of approaching it is just thinking of it as like, okay, this is metta for myself. This is me just allowing my mind to relax, to deepen, for awareness to kind of soak into all those parts that are unaware, or that are tense, or that are restricted or tight. And just allowing the breath to kind of flow into those areas. So the breath, of course, is a physical thing. And when the breath comes into our nose or our mouth, it goes down our throat and fills our lungs. And when that happens, quite a lot of different things happen in our body. So, you might find that our shoulders move a little bit. Something happens actually in our throat. There's some things that happen obviously in the lungs and the chest, at the intercostal muscles, the little muscles in between our ribs, they move very slightly apparently. And then the belly, when the diaphragm moves down, this muscle that's just in here, it moves down, it pushes against our belly, the internal organs in our belly. So our belly moves. So the whole of our upper body, the whole of our torso is moving. And there's energy coming into it. There's light coming into it, even maybe, or lightness coming into it. And that of course is where our emotions kind of live, isn't it? We don't usually have an experience of emotions, for example, happening in our hand, or even emotions happening in our leg. We usually have an feeling of emotions happening in our belly or our chest, maybe even in our head sometimes, not so much. Usually we think of thoughts happening in our head and emotions happening in our body. So we're kind of breathing with whatever the emotional experience is, as well as breathing, just breathing, so the movement happening. So we can just give our attention to the breathing in a way that's sensitive to our emotional state, and just whatever our emotional state is, if we're sensitive to it, if we're open to it, if we allow spaciousness to develop, whatever emotionality is there will, if it's a kind of pleasant thing, it'll tend to deepen. And if it's unpleasant or tense or conflicted, it will tend to resolve. So I just wanted to kind of connect up those things, because sometimes we can think about mindfulness and metta as two completely separate qualities, but there's an intimate connection between them, which is suggested by the Metta Sutta, where it says, whether you are staying on one place or traveling, sitting down or in bed, in all your waking hours, rest in this mindfulness, which they say is like living in heaven right here and now. So it's interesting that word mindfulness comes into the Metta Sutta itself, which is primarily about the quality of metta or kindness or love. So I'll just, if you've not done the practice before, if you've not done the mindfulness of breathing before, I'll just briefly recap the stages of the practice. So the main gist of it, the thing to remember, the thing to concentrate on, to focus on, is that you're paying attention to your breathing. That's the main thing. And when you notice that you're no longer paying attention to your breathing, you start paying attention to your breathing again. That's the main point. And then there's a few stages that help us to do that. So particularly in the first stage, we're placing a count at the end of the out breath. So we breathe in, we say 1. We breathe in, we breathe in, we breathe in, we breathe out, we say 2. Just in our natural rhythm. So you're not trying to change the way you breathe. You're just breathing in your natural way, and then breathe in, breathe out 3, breathe in, breathe out in your natural rhythm 4, and so on, until you've counted 10 cycles of breathing. So that's the first stage. The second stage, you put the count just before the in-breath. So you count 1, breathe in, we breathe out, say 2, you breathe in, you breathe out. So you just say it subvocally. And then in the third stage, you let go of the counting and you just being aware of your breathing. And the fourth stage, you're aware of the breath entering, you're aware of the point where the breath first enters your body. So I'll remind you of that as we go through. So you'll find it. If you've not done this much before, you'll find it's got a different... Well, anyway, I don't want to tell you what you'll find. You'll just find what you find. So part of the point of meditation is just tuning up to whatever's there. So I'm just going to let you do that. I'm not going to tell you what it's going to be because that's kind of counterproductive. So hopefully that makes sense. So what I'd invite you to do now is just to get into your meditation posture, and we'll make a start when you're ready. So making sure that you're not going to be interrupted, making sure that you're going to be comfortable, and actually making a firm decision that for the next period of time you're going to be meditating. So for the moment, all your other activities are put to one side. And we're going to focus on just the immediate experience of being in the place where we are. So you're in the room that you're in, having a sense of that room. The walls, the windows, the ceiling, the floor. Noticing the objects around you as well. And notice how you have a sense of boundary. So you have a sense that some aspects of what's in your environment are you and some are not you. So the walls aren't you, but the sensation of your body on what you're sitting on does feel like you. We also have a sense of part of space belonging to us and part of space not belonging to us. So it's as if we feel that the bit that's enclosed in our skin is us, and the bit that isn't us. So just sort of noticing that sense of boundary. And noticing sound, and noticing how sound doesn't quite fit within the boundary. When we hear a sound, it comes from somewhere, and we know that it comes from somewhere. It's almost as if our ears stretch out to meet it. Noticing the body that feels much more solidly within the sense of our boundary, the sense of our skin touching what we're sitting on, our skin touching our clothing. So we can feel our feet, the skin of our feet, the temperature of our feet, our legs, and the pelvis, buttocks, the genital region, the abdomen, the way our waistband or belt presses against our belly. And then just noticing how the skin of the chest, our belly touches our clothing, and maybe there's a slight movement, a slight brushing of the skin against our clothing as we breathe. The lower back, the shoulders, the upper back. aware of the neck. We might feel the collar of our blouse or shirt or jumper against our neck. The skin of our scalp underneath our hair, our face. So the face, of course, is where most of our senses are located. So just allowing the senses to relax, so letting the eyeballs rest back in their sockets. The cheeks soft, the jaw soft, allowing the ears to recede inwards. So the ears not reaching out to perceive sound, but just letting sound be there. And the way that the eyes closed, we just allow visual forms to be there without engaging with them. We allow sounds to be there without engaging with them with the ears. And then noticing taste. So aware of the tongue and the mouth. Any residual flavors from our meal, maybe, or drinks that we've consumed. Notice the warmth and the wetness of the mouth. And noticing the nose as a organ of scent, of smell, of odor, fragrance. So having been aware or become aware a bit more of the surface of our body, we can descend again down into the torso, down that sort of central channel of the spine, all the way down to the base, to the buttocks, to the pelvis, to the lower abdomen. And just notice how the body moves when we breathe. So what actually happens? What does your body do? How does it move in the belly, the abdomen? And just letting it do what it wants to do. So you're not trying to change your breathing. You're just trying to let it do what it does. At the same time, you let it do what it does with awareness. Not just a sense of observing, but also a sense of being with. So it's knowing and feeling, seeing and sensing the breath. Then moving up slightly and just having a sense of that central part around the base of the rib cage, the solar plexus. Maybe you can feel the movement of your diaphragm. And then feeling the chest cavity where the lungs reside and whatever movements take place with the breathing. In the throat. Maybe you can feel the breath passing through the nasal passages as well. And that awareness has a quality of kindness. So when we become aware, it's an act of kindness for ourselves already. We're not trying to push anything away. We're not trying to fight with ourselves, with our mind, with our heart. We're just trying to be more deeply in tune with, more deeply aware of, more deeply alive to what's going on. And the breath flows through the emotional body, as it were. It flows through those parts of our body where we feel emotion. So if there's tension or agitation or distress, just breathing through that, breathing into that. Particularly noticing the ease that comes, the relaxation that comes, the letting go that comes with the exhalation. And as you become aware of the exhalation and the inhalation, you become aware that the breath, as well as having a movement, as well as having movement, has rhythm. So tuning into the rhythm of the in and the out, the inhalation and the exhalation. Placing a count at the end of the exhalation. So in your own rhythm, your own time, you exhale, you say 1. Breathe in and out in your own rhythm, say 2. In, out, say 3. So carrying on in that way until you've counted 10 cycles of breath, and then just start again at 1. If you become aware that you've gotten distracted, your mind has wandered off, you can just return to the breath in your body and start again at 1. So mindfulness of breathing. So in the second stage, continuing to be aware of the breathing and placing the count just before the in-breath, so a subtle change. So we say 1, we breathe in, we breathe out, 2, in and out, and so on. Remembering that the purpose is not to get to 10 necessarily. The purpose is to become more deeply aware. So if you keep losing count, don't worry, just come back. And remember that meditation is about developing oneself, growing oneself. So it's an act of kindness for oneself, and why not do it in that kind of spirit? Do it as an act of care for oneself, minding oneself. And now on the third stage, we just let go of the counting and just be with our breathing. So maybe you can dial down the intensity of your attention a bit and just let the breath breathe you. And then moving into the fourth and final stage. So here we pay attention to the subtle sensations that arise at the point at which we first feel the breath entering the body. We really relish those sensations. And then let go of focusing your attention on the breath and just sit. So you're no longer trying to be focused. You're just there, you're just aware, you're just sitting. Okay, so if you like to just bring the meditation to a close in your own time. So yeah, so there's just a few things coming up. So on the 17th of October, which is in a few Sundays' time, there's a yoga and meditation workshop. So that's from 10:30 till 2. Pava is leading that. So that's an opportunity just to try out yoga. I was just talking about the body and how mindfulness starts with the body. Yoga is a practice where you become deeply and intimately aware of what's going on in your body in terms of sensation and feeling and so on. And it's actually a really good basis for developing mindfulness of anything, actually. Yeah, there's that. And then there's an 8-week course starting on the 18th of October, which is about a Buddhist response to the climate and ecological emergency. So that's kind of a slightly different thing. It's about awareness of the world that we actually live in, the environment that we live in, and what's our place in that world, and what's our responsibility even to that world that we live in. Myself and Prasanna Deva are going to be teaching a course that starts on Tuesday the 19th of October, which it's called Change Your Mind, and it's an introduction to Buddhism and meditation. So it'll be a different kind of angle on Buddhism and meditation from the one that we've taken on this Metta Bhavana course. It will include more on the mindfulness of breathing that we've just been doing there. And I wanted to mention, which I didn't mention last week, I don't think. No, I did mention it because Tony asked me, but about the October bank holiday retreat. So I was just mentioning earlier about retreats and how a retreat is an opportunity to just put everything down and just be more alive to, more aware of what's going on, not just when you meditate, but all day. So we're doing an online retreat over the October bank holiday weekend, which is from the 22nd to the 25th of October. And finally, I'm doing a day on basically on wisdom, on how to develop wisdom, on the 6th of November, which is a Saturday. And I just thought you might be interested. I did a little podcast with someone called Stephanie Preisner. Some of you might have heard of her. She does podcasts with different people, and I just realized a friend just told me that it's come out. So it's basically about, she's asking me the title of the thing is called "What's the Story with Buddhism, Jnanadhara?" So I'll just put that in the chat. You might be interested to have a look or a listen even. It's about an hour. It's basically an interview. So I'll just put that in there if you're interested. Yeah. And so that's it. So it's 8:05. So let's come back at 8:15. And we'll do a period of, I'll say a few things and then we'll have a period of Metta Bhavana. It looks like most of us are back. So, I just wanted to say something about the Metta Bhavana just briefly, and then we'll do a period of Metta Bhavana. So again, one of the key differences between the mindfulness of breathing and the Metta Bhavana is that when we're doing the mindfulness of breathing, we're trying to be more deeply aware of what's going on inside of us. One of the things about the Metta Bhavana is that we start with ourselves and we know what's going on with ourselves when we do that practice, that part of the practice. But when we bring to mind another person, we don't know what's going on for them. We imagine. So it's like it's awareness with an added imaginative identification with the other person. So it's a bit like, I know that you're there, and I also know that you exist from your side. Yeah, that's what you're saying when you say "may you be well" and so on. You're expressing that imaginative identification with them. You're expressing the fact that you know that they exist and that you care that they exist, if you see what I mean. So you're not just aware that they're there, you're aware that they're there, and you're aware that they exist from their side, that their life experience is as vivid and important to them as yours is to you. So we've been expressing that with primarily on the course. What we've done is we've express that in terms of a phrase. And I think that's a really, really good way of doing it, because it makes it really clear what it is that you're trying to do. But there are other ways of working in the practice, and some of the ways of working is to work in a way that's a bit more imaginative, in the sense of, imagination comes from the word image. So you can actually think of the person, and as you think of them, you can imagine them being well, you can imagine them being free, you can imagine them being happy, you can imagine them growing and developing. You can actually just imagine those things in terms of an image, rather than saying them with a word. It's just a slightly different way of doing it. And it can sometimes mean the practice is more still. So particularly if you're a bit more concentrated and things are kind of flowing, as it were, it can help you just become a bit more still with the practice, just by imagining. And furthermore, like we talked a little bit last week about this idea, and particularly in the latter parts of the sutta, where the Buddha talks about the metta kind of radiating. And you can even have a sense that the person is being filled with light. Metta is often expressed in terms of the radiation of light. So very often figures of the Buddha visualized, seen, imaged in the mind's eye as made of light. And you can bring that kind of imagination into the practice. When you imagine the different people, you can imagine light. So we're going to do the practice in a way that sort of explores that. And what I'm going to do is invite you to think of red light, because red is usually the color that's associated with metta, but you can think of any color you like, whatever color works for you, whatever color you feel most adequately embodies the characteristics of metta. So that might be green, it might be blue, but just for tonight we're going to do red. Okay, so the reason I'm saying that is because this is just one way of doing it. It's not the way of doing it, and it's more just to open up the fact that there are different ways of approaching it, and you might, well, it's up for you to explore them yourself. So hopefully what I've said is clear. I'll lead it through a little bit in that kind of way. So again, I'll just invite you to set up in your meditation posture, and just when you're ready, in a couple of minutes, we'll make a start. So just let you settle in your own way, and then we'll start.